I stood there in the tiny bathroom of my new lakeside cabin, the one with the old porcelain sink and the mirror that had a faint crack running diagonally across the top left corner. At 72 years old, Harold Thompson, retired mechanic with hands still calloused from half a century of wrenches and engines, I stared at my reflection and let the tears come. They were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of something I had almost forgotten existed, pure, unadulterated happiness. For 50 years, I had worked in the same garage on the edge of the city suburbs. I knew every car that rolled in, old Fords with rusted frames, sleek new imports that cost more than my yearly salary, pickup trucks belonging to farmers who paid me in cash and fresh eggs. I fixed them all, rain or shine, back aching, knees creaking, grease permanently embedded under my fingernails. My wife, Evelyn, God rest her gentle soul, had been my anchor through it all. We raised 3 children in a modest 3-bedroom house that always smelled faintly of motor oil and her homemade apple pie. Mark, the eldest, bold and charming, Tom, the quiet tinkerer, Sarah, our late-in-life surprise, fiery and independent. Evelyn got sick 8 years before she passed. Cancer, the kind that doesn't give warnings. I worked double shifts to pay the medical bills, sold the boat I'd dreamed of owning, skipped every small pleasure. When she finally slipped away 5 years ago, the house felt too big, too empty. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment closer to the kids, thinking proximity would keep the loneliness at bay. It didn't. The walls closed in with memories, and the children, now adults with their own families, visited only when they needed something, alone. A repair, a place to store overflow furniture, a free babysitter. But I had saved, not much by most standards, but every overtime dollar, every skipped coffee, every repaired appliance instead of replaced, it added up. $8,000 tucked away in a plain savings account, gathering dust and a few pennies of interest each month. I never touched it. It was my secret promise to myself. One day I would do something just for Harold. That day came 3 months ago. I found the cabin online, a 1940s 1-bedroom retreat on the northern shore of Lake Harmony, an hour's drive from the city. The listing called it Cozy Fixer-Upper. The photos showed peeling paint, a sagging porch, and a dock that leaned slightly to the left. I drove out alone one Saturday morning, heart pounding like a teenager on a first date. The realtor, a cheerful woman named Janet, met me there. The moment I stepped on the porch and saw the lake stretching out like polished glass, framed by pines and the distant call of a loon, I knew this was it. I bought it outright, no mortgage at my age. $8,000, every cent of my life savings, plus a little from selling the apartment furniture I no longer needed. The closing felt surreal, signing papers with shaking hands, while Janet smiled and said, "Congratulations, Mr. Thompson, she's all yours." I spent the first weeks making her mine. I sanded and repainted the walls a soft slate gray that made the morning light feel warm. I installed new shelves in the kitchen for my few pots and the cast iron skillet Evelyn and I received as a wedding gift. I bought a secondhand rocking chair from the local thrift store and placed it on the porch facing the water. I purchased 4 mismatched mugs, 4 plates, 4 sets of silverware, thinking 4 would be more than enough for a man who now lived alone. I planted wildflowers along the walkway and tomato seedlings in raised beds I built myself from scrap wood. I hung the framed photos, Evelyn laughing on our honeymoon in 1976, the 3 kids piled on my lap at Christmas 1985, our golden retriever Max, who died the same year Evelyn got sick. That first full day in the cabin, yesterday, I woke before dawn to the sound of birds I couldn't name. I brewed coffee in the percolator I'd brought from the apartment, carried it out to the porch in my robe and slippers, and watched the mist lift off the lake as the sun rose gold and pink behind the trees. I felt my chest expand in a way it hadn't in decades. I watered the tomatoes, planned the small workshop I'd build beside the shed for restoring old radios, a hobby I'd always meant to pursue but never had time for. I unpacked my mystery novels, stacking them neatly on the bookshelf I'd assembled the night before. Everything smelled of fresh paint and pine. Everything was quiet. Everything was mine. For the first time in my adult life, I owned a space no one could demand, no one could clutter, no one could take. I was in the bedroom, carefully placing Evelyn's favorite quilt on the bed.
After Evelyn's funeral, when I was hollowed out by grief, Mark had shown up with empty boxes and that practiced, sympathetic smile. "Dad, you're downsizing anyway. You don't need all Mom's jewelry clogging up the place. We'll keep it safe for the grandkids." Half of it vanished, her wedding ring misplaced, her mother's pearls borrowed by Lisa and never returned. Tom had turned my old garage into his personal storage unit for years until I sold the house. Sarah had borrowed my best tools one by one until my toolbox was nearly empty. I had always said yes, because I was afraid of being alone, because I confused being needed with being loved, because I thought that's what fathers do, give until there's nothing left. The next morning, the convoy arrived precisely at noon. 4 vehicles, doors slamming in sequence, children spilling out like marbles from an overturned jar. Mark's 3, Jake 12, Mia 9, Ben 6 raced straight to the dock, shoes and all, splashing and shrieking. Lisa emerged with a clipboard-like shopping list and a quick hug. Burgers, hot dogs, buns, chips, ketchup, mustard, juice boxes, marshmallows, graham crackers, chocolate, oh, and plenty of beer and wine. The adults need to unwind. Tom and his girlfriend Karen arrived next, her 2 teenagers already glued to phones, complaining about the lack of signal. Then Greg, Lisa's brother, unemployed for 6 months, his wife Tina, and their 4 children under 10, all clutching stuffed animals and demanding snacks before they'd even unpacked. The cabin, which had felt spacious and serene 24 hours earlier, shrank instantly. Footprints tracked across my freshly mopped floors, coolers thudded onto my kitchen counter, someone's toddler immediately opened the refrigerator and helped himself to my cheese. Adults claimed every chair on the porch, cracking open beers they'd brought while shouting requests at me for ice, bottle openers, paper towels. Mark clapped me on the back hard enough to jolt my shoulder. "Dad, this place is even better than the photos. We'll take the bedroom. Lisa's got morning sickness with number 4, needs quiet. Tom and Karen can have the pullout. The kids will pile on air mattresses in the living room. Perfect, right?" I opened my mouth, closed it, and finally drove to the general store in town. The bill came to $187.43. Ground beef, hot dogs, buns, condiments, chips, marshmallows, soda, juice boxes, 3 cases of beer, 2 bottles of wine. My hands trembled as I handed over the cash. Back home, I fired up the ancient grill on the porch, sweat dripping as I flipped burgers for 15 while children darted between my legs and adults lounged, laughing, phones out, photographing the cute rustic vibe for social media. That night, after dishes piled higher than my sink could hold, after stories around a fire pit I hadn't known I owned until Greg unearthed it from the shed, after s'mores that left sticky fingerprints on every surface, I unrolled an air mattress in the corner of the living room and lay down fully clothed. The snoring started within minutes, deep adult rumbles, high-pitched child whistles, the occasional cry from a toddler. My back screamed. My heart felt heavier than the air mattress beneath me. Sunday morning, I rose at 5, hoping for a moment of quiet. No such luck. By 6, children were awake, demanding cereal I didn't have. I scrambled the last 12 eggs, I'd bought extra yesterday, and stretched them with toast. Lisa appeared in the kitchen, hair perfect, and said casually, "Dad, we're thinking of staying the week. Work's slow for everyone, and the kids are having a blast. You don't mind, do you?" I minded, but I said nothing. Instead, I drove back to the store.
$236 this time. Cereal, milk, bacon, pancake mix, syrup, fruit, snacks, more beer, sunscreen, bug spray, diapers Tina had underpacked, swim floats, charcoal. My remaining cash dropped below $200. The days blurred into a relentless cycle: breakfast for 15, cleanup, lake time, during which I ferried forgotten towels, applied sunscreen to wriggling grandchildren, retrieved toys from the water, lunch for 15, cleanup, final stop, the general store. This time I bought only basics for myself: rice, beans, oatmeal, canned vegetables, eggs, coffee. Total, $48.17. When I returned just before noon, the complaints began immediately. "Grandpa, where's the good stuff?" "Dad, the kids are starving. Did you get Pop-Tarts?" "We're out of beer again." "Any chance you grabbed charcoal? Greg wants to grill steaks tonight." I set the single bag on the counter and faced them in the living room. 15 faces turned toward me expectantly. My voice shook at first, then grew steady. "Everyone, please sit. I have something important to say." I explained, calmly, clearly, that the cabin was my home, purchased for my retirement piece with every cent I'd saved over 50 years. That their uninvited arrival and extended stay had cost me nearly all my remaining money, that I could no longer afford to feed, supply, and house 15 people indefinitely. I placed the printed guest agreement on the coffee table. "These are the new terms, effective immediately. Each adult contributes $50 per day, each child $25, payable up front for the remaining days you wish to stay. This covers food, water, electricity, propane, laundry, and lodging. You may also choose to handle your own meals and supplies entirely, or you may depart at your convenience. No hard feelings. But the free all-inclusive vacation ends today." The silence lasted 3 full seconds. Then the explosion. Mark stood first, face red. "You're charging your own family to stay in your house? Have you lost your mind?" Tom muttered, "Greedy old man." Lisa burst into tears. "How can you do this to the grandkids? They'll be traumatized." Tina wailed, "We can't afford a hotel. Greg's unemployed." Greg added darkly, "You'll be all alone out here, Harold. Better hope nothing happens to you." Sarah, conferenced in on speakerphone, shouted, "Dad, this isn't you. Mom would be ashamed. You're choosing money over family." One of the teenagers filmed the whole thing on a phone, whispering, "This is wild," to his friend. I waited until the storm subsided, then spoke again, quieter but firmer than I'd ever been. "I am not choosing money over family. I am choosing dignity, health, and the right to enjoy the home I worked my entire life to own. I have given and given, money, time, memories, even pieces of your grandmother that were meant for me to keep. I have confused being used with being loved for far too long. That ends now." They tried every tactic: guilt, tears, anger, threats of cutting contact forever, offers of something symbolic, maybe $100 total. I held the line. Clara arrived uninvited but perfectly timed that afternoon, bearing a fresh peach pie. She sat on the porch with me while the family argued inside, her presence a quiet reinforcement that the world contained people who respected boundaries. By Saturday evening, after another round of drama, Mark stood and declared, "Fine, we're leaving first thing tomorrow. This isn't worth the hassle." They packed that night amid slammed doors, muttered accusations, and pointed silences. The children, confused, asked why Grandpa was being mean. The adults offered no honest answers. Sunday morning, the convoy pulled away. Mark's final words through the car window, "When you're sick and lonely out here, don't come crying to us."
I stood on the porch and watched the dust settle behind their tires. The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. Clara came over that evening with a bottle of wine and a roasted chicken. We ate on the porch as the sun set over the lake, painting the water in shades of fire. For the first time in a week, I sat in my rocking chair. My rocking chair. "You did it," she said simply. "I did," I replied, and realized I was crying again, tears of relief this time. The months that followed were a slow